Hi, my name is Chris Ippolite, and I am from a company called iSolutions Incorporated, and we are a FileMaker Platinum consulting firm. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of a FileMaker file that profiles FileMaker 13's new barcode scanning feature when you use FileMaker on iOS devices. So the demo that I'm going to show you today is based on a file called books. And what I'm going to show you is some functionality that we built in, as you can see here, that allows you to go into the database and create a new record. And instead of having to type all the information in, you can simply hit this little barcode icon that you see there, which will invoke FileMaker's barcode scanning feature. And it will go out to the Google API, which I'm going to be showing you a little bit about, and it will grab all the information you need, parse it into all the records in your database, create the book, and even the author record, and even pull in a thumbnail, all within a matter of a few seconds. So to give you an idea again, you just go and create a new record. Instead of manually typing in all this information, you can see it's all empty there. You hit the barcode scanning feature, scan a barcode, wait for a second or two, and then all the information will get automatically entered in. Now, this is all one big script on the back of the FileMaker database. I am going to show you how that script works. First, this little demonstration, of course, of what the final result will be. So why don't we take a look at the database. Now, first, before you get started, I should let you know that when you first open up the database, you'll see this message here that says you need an API key in order to use the barcode scanning feature. It's very simple to obtain. You just have to go to this website. It's the Google developers website. And if you follow the instructions, they will send you an API key. Very simple. It's like a 5 to 10 digit API key. Once you get that, click into this field here, paste your API key, and then you won't be bothered by that message anymore. Data good to go. So you'll notice that we've got several different layouts set up in this database. The one that you're going to concentrate on are either the iPad, book details, portrait, which has the button right here with the script attached, or the one I'm going to use here is the one that you also saw in the video, which is the book details iPhone. And the script that we're talking about, when we go into layout mode, we can see it. The script is assigned to this button. So here you see the button. And if I go into look at the button setup, we'll see that there's a script that's called Add New Book from ISBN Scan. So this, of course, assumes that you've already gone into your API setup layout, entered in your Google API key, and what it's going to do is use a FileMaker script that goes out to the Google API for books and parses out a bunch of information. But first, a quick demonstration of what actually happens when you go over to the Google API. If you look here, this is the Google Books API family website, part of the Google developer site. And if you want, you can go to this URL and find out all the information about what this API can provide for you. But basically what it does is allows you to create a string, much like the one that you see up here on the top of the screen, that the string, of course, is the same all the way up until this point. This information will be important in just a moment, but this is the value, the ISBN number that you need to provide. Now, we're going to let FileMaker's barcode scanning feature provide that ISBN, scan it, put it into a field, and then through a calculation, we'll be able to go to this URL. But once we do, the URL will return this JSON formatted chunk of data, and it's a ton of data about the books that you might see out there. It's everything from the name of from the title of the book to the authors, the publisher, even a brief description, additional ISBN information, everything you can possibly find. And my favorite part, a URL to go pull in thumbnails of the book cover, even previews or pages, web reader links, all sorts of stuff, a little text snippet there. I use a good chunk of this. You can add and embellish it if you'd like to. Here's what the thumbnail actually looks like, and it has its own URL. And by the way, there's this return that you get if the book is not found in the Google API library. So you'll see here, if it is found, you get all this data. If it's not found, you get that data. So how do we do this inside FileMaker now that we know all that information? Well, let's look at the script that I've got created for you. If you go into your scripts, you'll see Add New Book from ISBN Scan. I'm going to pull the script up on screen, and I'm going to walk you through what's going on here with the script. I've commented out each area so that it's easier for you to follow. But basically what happens here is we start off by using a new script step in FileMaker, which is called Insert from Device. Insert from Device was introduced in FileMaker 13. It has support only on FileMaker Go, which means on any iOS device this will work. Because there's a device involved, you can't actually run this on desktop. Of course, you can author it on desktop. And basically what it does is it asks us to pick the field that we want to populate, which I'm doing here in a text field called ISBN, and then it asks us the way that we want to populate that. I want to insert it from a barcode. And you see here, I'm asking it to use the camera, the back of the camera, give me full resolution, and have support for all the different ISBN codes that are selected here. And then once that scan occurs, I either commit the value to the ISBN field so that it's saved into the database, or if I then determine that that field is empty, I pop a message up to the user indicating that the scan did not work properly. So this way they can, we have a little bit of error checking built into the database. If it passes muster, meaning if this value is not empty, then we go on to another script step. This was not introduced in FileMaker 13, but this is really the crux of the system. I use it both here for populating the JSON data and also for later on in the script, which you'll see for populating the thumbnail. But this is what's called an insert from URL script step. And you'll notice that we pick a field. In this case, I have a field called JSON. It's just a simple text field. And then we specify the URL. So this is kind of part of the meat of the trick here. Notice that this is the URL I just showed you a moment ago that you need to use in order to query the Google Books API. But then after this, I used the FileMaker calculation dialog window to, instead of hard coding in the ISBN number, I concatenated the value in the ISBN field in the books table. So this way, dynamically, after I populate that field with the barcode scanning, then I can initiate this insert from URL. And what that does is it'll go into the ISBN or into the database and put a whole chunk of data like this into the JSON field. Now, of course, we need to determine whether or not we can parse that information out. The other thing too, by the way, I think this is kind of a neat tip. I did a get last error. And if you get this error back, 1631 in FileMaker, that means that you're not connected to the internet. So this is something arguably you could put at the very top of the screen here. You could still allow someone to scan, but before they go trying to parse out the data here, you can tell them they're not connected to the internet. So this is something that just allows you to make sure that your device is connected. But if we're connected, if the data was pulled properly from Google, we need to also check to see what kind of result we got back. So if you remember from the example over here, if I do get a value, I get all this information. If I don't get a value, this is all I get. So what I did is I said, hey, if there's an element called ID in the data that's returned, and you'll notice that there's no element called ID there, but if there's an element called ID, or more specifically in FileMaker, I said if the pattern count of the value ID in the JSON string equals 0, then clear this all out and tell people, oh, sorry, this book is not in the ISBN database. So basically, this whole section right here is simply for saying we scanned it, we did a successful scan, you are connected to the internet, but the value that was returned indicates that this book is not in the database. So go ahead and clear everything out, reset, go back and cancel the script. However, if it is found, the rest of the script navigates over to a layout in the database. Let me show you what that layout looks like. Got this layout right here, which I call dev and then parse. And it has the JSON field up here, and you'll notice that this is what it looks like when a successful scan is done using the device. All this information gets put into that field. It's not important that this field is on the same layout. I just did that for demonstration purposes. You can see there's a bit of a description here too. But notice that I've got all the different fields that are required for a book and also an author, as you'll see in a second. All those fields are actually on this layout. And so what happens is I run a script that goes to the very first field, grabs the information about the field, and then goes and finds the elements. I'll describe the details here in a second. Goes all the way through all these different fields, and then when they're all populated, the script is done. So the idea is parse all the data out of these elements into the appropriate fields to create the record on the fly. So let's take a closer look at how that works, because that's pretty sophisticated. So if you look, we go to the layout, and then I go to the very first field on the layout. That happens to be called e-tag. And what you're not seeing in the script, but is in fact a vital part of this, is that I've created a tab order. And we can look at that if we go into layout mode. So if you go set tab order, you'll notice that all these fields go in order. It's very important that they all go in order and that they're all included, because I'm actually using the go-to field to progress through each one of those fields and loop accordingly. So okay, so let's go back to the script. I go to the first field, and I'm setting a couple of variables here. I'm setting a variable to say, what's the active field name? So when I go to the e-tag field, I set that name to a temporary or local variable called first field. The reason I do that is because I want to know if I go back to this field in the tab order that I've already done it and it's time to quit the loop. That's actually my exit condition in the loop. Now here, I actually go into the field called books JSON, and I do a substitute. I run a calculation against the value that was in that field that I just showed you, and I set it to a global variable. And it could be a local variable actually. But what I do is I run a substitute, and what I'm trying to do is get rid of all the slashes and quotes and brackets and all the kind of extraneous text that I don't need. What I really want to do is strip this JSON information down to just simply what's called a name value pair. JSON's really nice in that it works really kind of database-like, where it gives you a piece of information that can be what we call the field name in FileMaker, and then a delimiter of some sort, in this case a colon, and then the value. So it's the name of the field, a colon, and the value. And what I'm trying to do is just strip it down to a return delimited list of only those values to make it a little bit easier to parse those out. Then what I'm doing, after I've cleaned up that JSON, now it's time to start going inside of it and parsing it. So the very first field that I'm on, I grab the active field name, and I actually grab the active table name as well. And that's because down here I'm using a script step called set field by name, and it requires that I have the table and the field name concatenated together so it knows what field to set to. So basically, after I scrub out the data, clean it up a little bit, grab the information off of the first field that I'm on, and then I do something that looks very simple in the script, but in fact what it is a special, I use a special custom function that I've created called JSON parse. Let's go take a look at that. No small amount of programming here. Go to custom functions. You see I've got JSON parse here, and by the way, if you want to bring this into your own solution, you can open up your database. This, of course, requires FileMaker Pro Advanced for you to be able to see this. So if you don't have FileMaker Pro Advanced, it'll still work. You just won't be able to get to this dialog. But if you do have it, you can then use the import function in your own database and import this custom function into it. Let's take a look at the custom function. We've got it all commented out here. This describes what it does. You see that it's called JSON parse, and what we need to feed it is the JSON text. In our case, it's that JSON field. The element name that we're looking for, the delimiter, which is a colon in this case, and the occurrence that we're looking for. So here we say JSON text, element, delimiter, and occurrence, and they're all defined right there. And for example, here's what an example of the element and the value would look like. So it would be title, would be the element we're looking for. Here's the delimiter, and then here's the value that we're actually trying to extract. So this let function here says start at the position in the JSON text where the first occurrence of the element can be found. Then go through here and do a series of different functions, all against the start element, essentially extracting the element. And there's some math here where you can tell how long the character length is of the data value. It basically just subtracts the end character value from the beginning character value and tells you to pull that number of values. Actually, it goes 2 characters over to account for additional spacing or delimiters. And when all that is done, we get the JSON result. So it's a lot of programming here, and there's a lot assumed in this part, but basically what happens is we go into this scrubbed out JSON data, we grab the element information that we're looking for, feed that into our function, and that field name needs to be the exact same syntax as the element name. So that's a big issue here that you need to adhere to, and it doesn't matter because your users don't care what your field names are. But I went into the actual element names in JSON, and that's what I used to name my field. So if you look in the JSON string that's returned up here, you'll see things like e-tag. You see e-tag is one of the names, authors, publisher, all these are the names, and that's really the trick here. So when you grab the name of the active field, you're going to get that element. Then I use that element in my search so that I can parse all that information out of the JSON. So now from that, we then go to the appropriate field, and based on the field that we just parsed out of the JSON, based on the element name, which is also the field name, I do what's called a set field by name. And this is why I'm pulling the table name and the field name, because in order to be able to determine the target field, you do that via calculation. And I've set the target field to whatever the value is that I've selected here. I used a get active field name, get active table name, and I threw the double colons in there already. And then we use the calculation to parse the result. And that's just going to be whatever is left in my global value, where I set the global value to be to use the JSON parse. So a lot going on there, and the beauty of having a video of this is you can go back and walk through those each time. But then this is the key to it working. I'm looping through the values. I go to the next field in the tab order, and then I create a loop. So this just does all of these actions for the very first field I land on, and then I loop through all the different records, and you see what's happening here is I'm doing everything that I've done up above, but I'm doing that again because I want to loop through the different records based on the tab order. So all these items up here are the same as these first items that you're seeing there. But then, at some point in the tabbing through the records, I'm going to encounter the field that I started on. So that's what this is all about. That's why I grabbed that field up here, because I wanted to know where I started. So if first field is active field name. Now if I get down to this point and say, hey, if the first field that if the field that I'm on equals the first field, then we can stop all this loop and instead commit the record, which then commits all the values that I parsed into the fields, into the database. And then we can actually go back to a layout where we started. If you're on iPad, we go back to the book details on iPad. If you're on iPhone, it goes back to the book details on iPhone. But the other thing that I do is I check to see if the container field called thumbnail is empty. And if it is empty, I can actually populate it using an insert from URL, because one of the values that I'm extracting from Google is this entire URL, and that URL is the one that points to the book image. And what's cool about this FileMaker script, the script step called insert from URL, is you can go pull an image from a web address, in this case this direct URL to the thumbnail, and insert it into the container. And if I do that, I commit the record, and then I can exit the script, and then I can be done. If I've detected that this value we did not land on the first field, then it goes to the next field. So this will only stop and run all the thumbnail parsing part of it if it's determined that we landed on the field that we started on. If not, it just keeps going through this loop till it's done. So you could conceivably have hundreds of different fields on this one record. As long as they're all named the same name as the element name that you're extracting, it'll just keep going and going and going until it's done. Now in the video, you may have noticed that I was actually populating the author's record as well. Now there's a little bit of a trick here. You'll notice I have authors listed twice. Well, actually one of these is a related field that comes from the author table. Now just to kind of give you a little peek behind the scenes, the authors and books have a relationship. One author can have many books. This is a one-to-many relationship. But the key is on the author side, I've actually checked this allow creation of records in this table via the relationship. Now this is a customary technique in FileMaker where when you're putting a portal on the parent side of a parent-child relationship, you can allow users to enter child records through the portal. And what it does is it automatically populates the ID of the parent. Well, I switched it up. I actually turned this on in the parent, and so that way when I check that box, and this is kind of a neat little byproduct of all this, by setting a value to a related field on the layout, it will automatically create the parent record in the database and then link these two together. So all that is done through that one script and the corresponding custom function. And if you want to take a look at how this works again, now that you know what's happening behind the scenes, you can see that we go over to book detail. We create a new book. Once that new book is created, we see that all the fields are empty except for some of the auto-enter values. We hit the button for the scan. Now the script is running, scans the barcode. We get a successful value in the ISBN field. It populates the JSON field and in a second or two goes through that parsing script and populates all of this. And you'll see that the author record, if we click on that, was created and it was linked to the original value. So to see that again, you can go to create a new record. See, we've got 3 total records in the database. Populate the ISBN through a scan. Scan the barcode using FileMaker's insert from device. And that automatically populates all these values, including the thumbnail, and again, creates the related author record, which has a key that links it back to the book record that was created. So some pretty fun stuff here. I hope you find this interesting. I hope you find the demo file useful. This is something that I think really shines the light on how useful FileMaker's insert from device script step is, as well as other things you can do with barcoding instead of just simply populating a field, but triggering a whole series of script actions off of that field. So enjoy the file. Appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot. This is Chris from iSolutions.